So yesterday we spoke a little bit about the Cultural Revolution and the impact it had on Buddhism in both Tibet and China. The danger that practitioners faced. And so to relate that to our experience and see the religious freedom that we enjoy in this country, that gives us a feeling of safety in practicing our religion, gives us access to materials, teachers, Dharma friends, and so on. So to really appreciate this situation that we have, where we have everything available to us, and we don't have to live in fear. And so appreciating this freedom, then let's make a strong determination to use it, to learn and practice, to serve others with the Dharma, with the ultimate aim of attaining Buddhahood for the benefit of self and others. Okay, so there's two questions here. I'll answer them. There may be a few details that I want to check and confirm afterwards, but if there's any change, I can tell you. So the first question, it is most surprising that the standard edition of the Chinese canon that is in use today was published in Japan in 1934. Given the situation that there was so much Buddhism going on in China, and this was pre-Cultural Revolution days, how did it come about that the Chinese canon was published in Japan? It's an interesting question. I don't have the exact steps how that happened. What I'll do is just make a guess, is that you've always had many, Japan was a Buddhist country, and even though they didn't have the Vinaya, Buddhism was strong there in those days. Christianity, started coming in, especially after World War II into Japan, but not in the pre-World War II days so much. And Japanese always had a lot of, and still do, did a lot of research about Buddhism. Yeah. In fact, it's very surprising that in Taiwan, people, this was maybe 25, 30 years ago. It's changing a bit now. But when I was there to take Bhikshuni ordination, I met so many people who had gone to Japan for Buddhist studies. And I was very curious about it because I thought Buddhism is so rich in Taiwan. Why are they going to Japan? And I think that I found that there was this mentality of, well, they know it better than we do, and they have better academic institutions than we do. So it was seen as something really good to be able to go to Japan and study there. So it may have something to do with that. Now there's more Buddhist colleges in Taiwan. So the Sangha is getting a better education. But still, they send people to Japan for PhDs and MAs. Yeah. And you'll see that there's still, a lot coming out of Japanese universities and research, into Buddhist things, translations of texts and so on. So it may have something to do with that. Actually, 1934, when did the Japanese invade China? I think, 37, and then they went into Shanghai, maybe 38, 39. So there was already some pressure from Japan in 34, so it may have been something to do to make friends with them. I don't know, or just the Buddhists linking together to, form some sense of safety amongst each other. I'm not sure. Or it could just be that one person knew somebody else and the benefactor was in Japan. Might have been that. I don't know. Okay, and then as described in a paper by Professor Louis Peng, who is he? Whoever wrote the question. Okay, who is he? Do you know? Okay, because I'm wondering if he's a Christian, if he's where he's stationed, what university, because that can tell you a lot. Anyway, his 2005 article said, during the Cultural Revolution, the major religions were almost destroyed, but did not die out completely. That was probably the lowest point of Chinese religious communities, as almost all the churches were destroyed. Why did he say churches when Christianity was a minority religion there? Monks and nuns were sent back home, and religious leaders were sent to factories or farms for re-education through forced labor. All that's very true. And they were humiliated and had to march through the streets. I met when I was in China in 95? Wow, that was a long time ago. Doesn't feel that long ago. I met some nuns, and their temple had been taken over and made into a factory. They had to wear dunce caps and placards and walk through the streets. The placards said, I'm a foolish religious person, this kind of stuff. They really humiliated people big time in the Cultural Revolution. So all of that is true. Many of them died. The number of religious believers fell drastically. Christian activities, why Christian, That's why I'm curious who this guy is. Christian activities were completely forced underground. So the question is, how did Fatsun and Yinshin practice and teach in that period? Okay, Yinshin, I'm not sure when he left Taiwan, left China, because at some point, I think, he lived in Taiwan. He may have lived in Malaysia. I can't remember exactly at some point. But Fatsun, the thing is that during the Cultural Revolution, extremely dangerous, but there was the Chinese Buddhist Association, which existed way before, I don't know when it was initially formed, but it was under, was this association of different temples and things like that. If you cooperated with them, then you were allowed to do something. You had to, like the Panchen Lama, the previous Panchen Lama, he cooperated with, with the CBA. And so he was able to do some religious activities. Later, he kind of separated himself from them, and then the Beijing government got quite mad at him. But there was a time when he was cooperating. So Fatsun, he wasn't so much having disciples, he was more of a scholar and a translator. So it could be that cooperating with them was not too much of a trial for him, and then they just let him do his translation and scholarly work. It could have been something like that. Or it could have been that, because he was translating things with Chinese and Tibetan, then they could use his translations again to show the closeness between Tibetans and Chinese, to hook the Tibetans back into being part of the motherland. that kind of thing. The question, what I'm curious about is Venerable Nenghai, who had actual monasteries, and what happened to them. So I'm sure they must have been severely restricted. I don't know how much, but maybe we can find out. We can, go online and find out. Okay, then I'm confused about the source and timing of the Abhidharma basket. Is this also in the Pali Canon, where Sangha and Vasubandhu commentators? Okay, now the Abhidharma basket's quite interesting, and it's very different in all the canons. Okay, now even amongst the Theravada, you'll find different views of the origin of the Abhidharma. The really traditional conservative people will say that during the 3 months that the Buddha was in the heaven of the 33, teaching his mother, Labab Duchen which happened a couple of days ago, was the end of that. They say that he taught his mother the Abhidharma, and every evening he would magically come down to earth and tell Shariputra what he had taught his mother about the Abhidharma that day in the heaven realm of the 33 gods. Okay, so they say that's how it came about. And then some others say that it was written by arhats, kind of, after the Buddha passed away. The Abhidharma was written by arhats, except one book. I can't remember the name of it. I'd recognize it if I saw it, because there's 7 Abhidharma treatises. So they say 6 were written by the arhats. 1 was predicted by the Buddha, and he said, at a future time, somebody named, I think his name was Moggallana Putra, will, write the 7th one. So this occurred during the reign of King Ashoka, where they had the 3rd council of Buddhists. And one of the reasons for the council is they thought that there were a lot of heterodox views out there. And so I think his name was Moggallana Putra. Don't write that down. I could be wrong. Okay. Started with an M somewhere. Anyway, he, this particular monk, he might have been an arhat, wrote this last Abhidharma text in the form of, some people say this, and this is the refutation of their wrong view. And then other people say this, and this is the refutation of the wrong view. So he didn't say who the people were who spoke them. He just said there are these wrong views and refuted them. And so that's how the 7th Abhidharma text came about in the Pali tradition. Okay. Now the Sarvastivadis had 7 Abhidharma treatises as well, but they were not the same 7 as the Pali canon had. So in the Tibetan, they only have, I think, 1 of the 7 or part of the 7, and then they have Vasubandhu and Asanga. Vasubandhu and Asanga were 4th century A.D. Yeah, so a lot of time had gone by, before they wrote their text. So in the Tibetan canon, too, they may have like little smatterings of Abhidharma here and there, but certainly not the voluminous texts that you find in the other traditions. The Chinese canon, I can't remember well, but I think they must have the 7 Sarvastivada treatises, because, they still talk about them, so people still talk about them, so somebody's got to have them in their canon. So that's the point I think I need to check, but I think they they must have them. Okay, so by and large, most people think in the Mahayana tradition, in the Sanskrit tradition, I should say, that the Abhidharma was written post-Buddha's life. They don't say this thing about the Buddha coming down every day and during Vasa and telling Shariputra what he taught. And then, in Sri Lanka nowadays, there's a lot, they really respect modern historical research. And a lot of those people now are saying, too, that the Abhidharma texts were written maybe even several centuries after the Buddha lived, maybe 2-3 centuries, as the idea being that, after the Buddha passed away, then people were reading the sutras and they were trying to make links between different passages. And so the Abhidharma, at least in the Pali Canon, gets extremely detailed and technical. And there's 3 of those and 2 of those, and the 4 of those relate to the 5 of these in 7 different ways. And, it's very technical, but it was the attempts of, the first generations after the Buddha for, maybe I'm just guessing a couple of 100 years. It may very well be more. Well, probably was if Vasubandhu and Asanga were so much later. To really look more in depth about the canon and how the different points related to each other.
So, did the Tibetans see Asanga and Vasubandhu as like compilers out of the sutra, or commentators, or were they?
They wrote treatises. Yeah, I mean, only the Buddha spoke the sutras, or the people that the Buddha empowered. Right. Yeah, so everybody else was either wrote treatises where they collected ideas together and put them there, or commentators where they wrote a commentary on a certain sutra.
So they are not they're commentators on the Abhidharma basket, or
their stuff is the Abhidharma basket. So their texts are over here. Okay, and they're the chief ones that the Tibetans rely on, because like I said, they only had part, or I don't know, maybe the whole thing of one of the 7. Yeah, but when they, in the monasteries, when they study Abhidharma, it's always Vasubandhu, and then they'll bring in Asangas. They'll mention Asanga too, because they talk about but they'll study Vasubandhu, but they follow Asanga much more. Okay. Yeah. And so even the Vinaya basket, most of it is attributed to the Buddha, but there's also some history in it of what happened to the Sangha after the Buddha passed away. Yeah, that was written later. The sutra basket is, what the Buddha spoke or what some of his distinguished disciples said. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. The 3 councils, I need to do some more reading on that. I was thinking about them the other day. They are very confusing. Okay, the first council is not so confusing. As soon as you get to the second one, it's funny you mentioned this, because I was thinking about it just a few days ago, that I think, the first council was called by Mahakassapa to get the 500 arhats together, and Upali recited the Vinaya and Ananda recited the sutra baskets. Okay? And they wanted to codify those and get them all standardized, because right after the Buddha died, Mahakassapa heard somebody say, "Oh, glad that old guy's gone, now we can do what we want." And the person who said it was a Buddhist monk. So Mahakassapa got alarmed and said, "No, we got to get everything the Buddha said in one place together." Okay. and so there was the recitation in Rajagriha. Okay. Then about the second council, what I want to research is, I think there may be completely different accounts of the second council in the Pali Canon and in the Chinese or Tibetan canons. You know, that because, I've heard two different accounts, and even within the two different various details. So, I'd like to do some more research about that. And what's difficult is they always just say the first council, the second council, and they don't tell you which Vinaya they're speaking from, because it's their own tradition, and so obviously everybody should follow that one. Yeah, so I might have to, see what some academic scholars have researched on it. Yeah, but the two different views I have are, one, that there was some, in one city, I forget which one it was, monks were storing salt, and I think they accepted money, and they were doing some, things, well, not major things, yeah, but enough so that the people who took the Vinaya very literally were getting upset, and so another group came from another area and said, we're going to have a council, and and one version I heard said the people who came from the other area said, you guys who are behaving like that are wrong. Another version I had said was, no, the people who were behaving like that were came out victorious in the council, and that's why they were called the Mahasangikas, because Maha means the greater ones, and that they were the ones who were the, later, their tradition later became a Mahayana, they're the precursors to the Mahayana. So I don't know. I mean, this is why what I'd like to do is get a really nice kind of thing of who says what, because there's so many different versions. The other version I heard about the Second Council is that, and this came, Venerable Benyon mentioned this one, so maybe this one's in the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya, that there was a discussion about arhats, and could arhats fall back? Could you be an arhat and fall back? Okay, so I don't know. I'll see what I can do in terms of tracking it down, or maybe you want to do some research on it, and yeah, Analaya, yeah, and Sujato Bhikkhu also. So some of his books, he wrote a book, Sex and Sectarianism. That's in our library, so you might look there too. Yeah, so if you can, do the research for me, thank you. And then report back to the whole group. Okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
In the Pali tradition, it said that in Sri Lanka, when it fell to the Cholas, that both the Bhikshu and the Bhikshuni orders were destroyed. Although the Bhikshu order was destroyed when the Sri Lankan king invited monks from Burma to come and give the ordination. So I'm making a conclusion that the Bhikshuni Sangha was only extant in Sri Lanka because of Ashoka's daughter, and that the other countries around may not have had Bhikshunis?
Yes, that's what it.
Why it was so fragile?
Yeah, right. That's what seems happened with the Bhikshunis. Is Thailand says they never had any Bhikshunis. IIT has found some sketchy thing that maybe there were, but it seems most of the other traditions, Theravada traditions, say they never had Bhikshunis. And so it's unclear also in India how late the Bhikshuni order lasted, because I don't think they received as much support as the bhikkhus. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Hat Sutra is in a sutta basket, and you say maybe thought something and you got to share that?
Well, they just, maybe because it's the perfection of wisdom sutra, that the Buddha spoke, so they put it in the sutra basket. But the Tibetans usually say the sutra basket is affiliated with the higher training and concentration. But the Prajnaparamita Sutras explicitly deal with emptiness, which is wisdom, so you would think it would be in the Abhidharma basket. But it's not, probably because the Abhidharma basket came about later. Yeah?
And the Gadam tradition got involved, how you say that, the Gelug tradition stems out of the Gadam tradition.
Right.
How is that all historically, I don't know.
Okay. Well, the Kadam tradition in Tibet actually influenced all the schools in Tibet, and so, but especially the Kagyu and Sakya, and then it seems like the Kadam, very much influenced the Gelug tradition. I don't know exactly the history about it. Lama Tsongkhapa probably relied a lot on some of the Kadampa texts and thought training texts. Maybe you could research that one and report back to us. Okay, you like reading history. I don't know all the ins and outs of how that happened. Yeah. Actually, I do know, Lama Tsongkhapa, what I do know is that Lama Tsongkhapa had no thought to start a new tradition. He was the great Rime, person, because he heard teachings from everybody, and passed down and debated with everybody. So, but then it was his disciples that gathered that together, and that then gave it a name and called it a separate tradition. But from J. Rinpoche's side, he had no thought of doing that. Yeah?
I thought I was curious how each of the Chinese schools focus on specific sutras.
Uh-huh.
If you know more about how that came about, and did that make them more sectarian?
I don't think that makes them more sectarian. To me, it makes complete sense that, if you get a whole bunch of sutras, and some of these sutras are huge, and you read some of them, and, it takes, you could do your whole practice based on Avitamsaka Sutra in English is this big, thin paper, small type. You could spend your whole lifetime studying that sutra. Same with the Prajnaparamita Suttas. So many of them. And so to me, it makes sense that to certain groups of people, different sutras just really speak to them, and so their tradition forms based on that group of sutras. Usually it's not just one sutra, it's a collection of sutras. But that makes complete sense to me. Whereas in the Tibetan tradition, sorry to say, they very seldom read the actual canon. And His Holiness comments on this, that in the Tibetan temples, you have the Kangyur and the Tengyur, and people go and, knock their heads and ask for blessings. But the texts just collect dust. Nobody takes them down to read them unless there's a benefactor who says, we want to sponsor a reading of the Kangyur and Tengyur. And then what they do is they sit everybody in rows, and they take one text, and you get the first 15 pages, and you get the second, and you get the third. So everybody's reading the text, different pages out loud, because the benefactor wanted everything read. So you get the sequence of what your 15 pages say, but you don't know what came before, you don't know what came after it. Yeah? So, you'll have some really exceptional geshis and khenpos and scholars who will go and read the sutras. and track down the quotations and read the sutras per se, but not so much. Whereas the Chinese really do read the sutras and study the sutras themselves. What the Tibetans did is they relied so much on the Indian commentators, because the Indian commentators took, different themes out of different sutras and compiled the information together, and then unpacked what the Buddha, didn't have time to say in it. And, so when you read the treatises, they're really very comprehensive, and the commentaries too, but especially the treatises where they take quotations from different sutras to validate a certain point they're making about what the Buddha said. Yeah. So it's interesting because when they had a translators conference among Tibetans, and later they went to see His Holiness, they reported that they were going to start translating the sutras first, and His Holiness said, no, do the Tengyur. Do the Tengyur first. Yeah. So there's different approaches for different people. Yeah. I actually find the Chinese Buddhist community remarkably open-minded. I would say the most open-minded of, because you saw Tai Tzu started academies studying Pali, Japanese, Tibetan Buddhism. In Tibet, did they start academies studying other Buddhism? Forget it. In Sri Lanka, Thailand, did they do that? No. Yeah. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is the Kangyur part of have the Pali Canon and the Mahayana Sutras? I'm not quite sure what exactly is compiled.
Okay, there's 3 different canons. Okay? So you're speaking particularly about the Tibetan canon. Okay, so the Tibetan canon has about 100 sutras that do not have the name Mahayana before it. So those were probably, nobody's done a whole lot of research on the Tibetan canon, when I've asked, but it seems like, so those were probably ones translated either from Sanskrit, from Central Asian languages, and they would probably be the sutras that had the most in common with the Pali sutras. Okay? Then you have this whole wealth of Mahayana sutras, and then you have tantras. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, how much did the Bon tradition influence the Tibetan tradition that we practice today?
Yeah, well, there was, between the Bon and the Tibetan tradition, there was a lot of mutual influence. Yeah. So, again, I'm just giving some rough generalizations. I'm not a scholar on this topic. But I think the whole thing of doing mows, came from Bon. They took a lot of the indigenous practices in Tibet and gave them a Buddhist meaning or a Buddhist overlay. Okay? So I think, doing divinations and mows, doing, when they go to the top of the mountain and with the sampa and they throw the sampa to the gods, that was probably came from the bones. I wonder this one that you're doing, the Sur. I wonder if that originally was a Bon practice that was given a Buddhist meaning. These kinds of things. And then they have all sorts of different practices, for spirit offenses and so on. So all of, some of that definitely comes from the Tantras. Some, it maybe came from that there's a Bon origin and then it was given a Buddhist meaning, or they affiliated one of the Buddhist deities with that practice. Yeah, could be like that. Then going the other way, I think because the Buddhism took on, was popular in Tibet, then the Bons kind of said, well, we got to get more organized too. And so it's very interesting. The Bons will wear donkas like this, but the middle part, which sometimes is yellow, theirs is blue. So if you'll see people wearing donkas with the blue center part, they're Bonpo. Yeah. And there's, I think, monks, Bon monks. I don't know if there's nuns or not. But, I don't know that was there before Buddhism came. Okay? And then it's very interesting. You have lamas like Namkhai Norbu, who he'll say, Garab Dorji is the name of the person who they say originated the Bon tradition. And they have a whole kind of Bon Dzogchen, and so Namkhai Norbu will teach Bon Dzogchen and kind of Buddhist Dzogchen together. Yeah, so there's some mixing going on. Yeah.
Are they part of also the Tibetan Parliament? Aren't they represented?
Yes, they're definitely represented in the Tibetan Parliament. They're Tibetan citizens, so of course they have to be represented. Okay, shall we go on with the text? You look like you have a question. Okay. Now, but those of you who I asked, please go and do some research and tell us what you find out, okay, about those different topics. Okay. So, Chapter 2, Refuge in the Three Jewels. All Buddhist traditions agree that taking refuge in the Three Jewels is the demarcation of becoming a Buddhist. Now that's something in itself, what makes you a Buddhist? Yeah? Specifically, as they say, it's whether you've taken refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha or not. Yeah. Now, that could mean whether you've taken the formal refuge ceremony, or it could mean whether in your heart you've taken refuge. Okay. While people may take refuge in the Three Jewels for a variety of reasons, stable refuge comes from knowing and understanding the teachings through reasoning and experience, thus confirming for ourselves that the Buddha's teachings are true. So right there, what you see is that before taking refuge, we have to have some knowledge of the Buddha's teachings, and think about them, be convinced through applying reasoning that they make sense, meditating on them, seeing that they're effective, and through that, then turning to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha for refuge. Yeah. So that's why, when people take refuge, I always tell them it's not an on and off light switch, that you either have refuge or you don't. You take refuge, but then, and sometimes people take refuge really early on, yeah? But then when you practice, then it's like the light switches that you turn to make it brighter. As you practice, your refuge becomes deeper and more heartfelt. And I think all of us who have practiced for a while can really see that in our own minds, the change in our minds and how we relate to the Three Jewels over time. Okay. Now, the question comes, some people ask, can you take refuge without believing in rebirth? Okay. Now, the technical answer to that is it would be very difficult, because how could you how could you accept the Four Noble Truths, with true cessation being the cessation of samsaric rebirth if you don't accept samsara. And samsara is, predicated. It's the cycle of constantly recurring problems, being reborn again and again and again with 5 polluted aggregates. So, strictly speaking, it would be hard to say you're a Buddhist if you don't believe in rebirth. However, His Holiness says that as far as he's concerned, that if people find things in Buddhism that make sense to them, that help them, then it doesn't really matter whether or not they believe in rebirth. What's important is that they want to develop a kind heart, and they found Buddhist techniques helpful in developing a kind heart, and they want to practice those techniques. Yeah. So he's kind of made a more modern, liberal way for many people to become Buddhists. Yeah. Skillful because, maybe by coming in and practicing like that, putting the issue of rebirth on the back burner, then over time they'll come to have deeper faith because of the teachings on loving kindness and the 4 immeasurables, and that will change the karmic configuration and make rebirth seem, more plausible to them. Okay. So, when people ask you, don't, I would advise, especially with newcomers, don't be a hardliner and, yes, you've got to believe in rebirth or else, that's not very productive, is it? Okay. The chief way the Buddha leads us is by teaching the path to liberation and awakening. The Samadhi Raja Sutra, this is the King of Concentration Sutra. There are some outstanding quotations of that sutra. But this is one of them. But there's some other really beautiful quotations. Buddhas do not wash away negativities with water, clear away beings' dukkha with their hands, or transfer their own knowledge to others. They liberate by teaching the truth of reality. Yeah, extremely important quotation, okay? So Buddhas don't wash away negativities with water. In ancient India and still now in Hinduism, the water of the Ganges cleanses your negativities. So now somebody's going to say, well, what about in initiations? You drink blessed water, and that's supposed to clear away your negativities. Yeah, so aren't you just like the Hindus? Aren't you contradicting this first line here? Okay. My personal opinion, okay, is I think that there's certain elements of Indian culture, that were strong in Hinduism that snuck into Buddhism, and this thing of blessed water was one of them. It comes more in the Tantra, However, if you look, water in many traditions is what purifies and blesses you. Well, that's the whole idea of baptism, isn't it? Yeah, and crossing yourself when you first go into the church. And, so many religions have this idea of water as a purifying substance, which you can see why, because, you don't wash your dishes with milk or gravy, you wash them with water. Okay. But what this line I think is really referring to is, don't just have that attitude, whether it's the Ganges water or the water from a bumpa, that it's the water that clears away your negativities. With any of these external substances, whether it's water or blessing cords or, any of those kind of things. They're just a physical object, okay? The idea is that we remember, they serve as factors that either get us to concentrate or make us remember the points of the Dharma that we know. So, if you're drinking some blessed water, and I'm not negating the fact that, people with high spiritual realizations, it's quite possible by the power of their saying mantra and blowing on this water, that the water has, some special dynamic, But what really is the blessing is when you sip the water and you think yourself, I regret all my negativities and now they're purified. Now I'm going to go on into the future and I'm not going to do those things again. I'm going to be clean, clear in how I relate to others. Okay, that's what really purifies. When you look at the court, if it makes you remember your teacher and the teachings that you've had, or you think that the two ends of the string represent compassion and wisdom, and you're putting them together. Or the knot in the middle of the string represents the complementary nature of emptiness and dependent arising. Remembering that's the blessing of your mind, Otherwise, you see people wearing, 10, 20 cords, and I've seen this sometimes, and they still get sick, and but the thing is that these kinds of things, they have a psychological effect, so the psychological effect can be very strong when people have a lot of faith. So so we can't discount that. Okay, but Buddhas do not wash away negativities with waters. Clear away sentient beings' dukkha with their hands. So all your samsaric suffering, I'm gonna do Reiki and make all your samsaric suffering go away, or I'm gonna wash your body, or stroke your body, and then that's gonna make your negative karma go away. That's not going to happen. Okay? So again, these both are external methods, aren't they? Coming from outside. The water's going to do it. Somebody else's hands are going to get rid of my negative karma. Okay? We're the ones who create the negative karma. We're the ones who have to purify the negative karma. Because if the Buddha could have taken away our negative karma already and ceased our samsara already, he definitely would have. There's no reason not to. Because he doesn't want anybody to suffer. But the fact is that Buddhas cannot take our negativity away from us. Or can they transfer their knowledge to others? Okay, so pulling out the thumb drive, plugging the thumb drive into you. They're going to make a new little port, along with the chips we're all going to have under our skin to identify us, then a new little port to transfer knowledge. They're trying to duplicate, like starting with animals' minds on computers. How in the world do you do that? They're not the minds, the brains. I'm sorry. They're taking like slices of brains and somehow duplicating it on computers. I don't understand. Okay? But this is the whole thing with cryogenics, freezing your head or freezing your whole body, or now the latest thing is, duplicating your brain on a hard drive, I don't know. They haven't been able to do it yet. But that's the idea, isn't it? That somehow we're gonna, if we could preserve our brains somehow, then all of us would be preserved. that who we are is all inside this gray matter that if you saw sitting on a table there, you would go, yuck. Yeah. Anyway, the Buddhas can't transfer their knowledge and realizations into us. We have to practice. So we have to purify, we have to practice, we have to do everything ourselves, So we always say to people, you can hire somebody to mow your lawn, but you can't hire somebody to eat for you so that you'll feel full. Yeah, that would be a good way to go on a diet, wouldn't it? Pay somebody else, they eat and you're full. It would be a good way to catch up on your sleep, too. Pay somebody else to sleep and then you don't have to sleep. I'd like to do that one. Yeah. But these things don't work, do they? So they're exactly like Dharma practice. They're things we have to do ourselves. Okay, so how do Buddhas benefit us? They liberate by teaching the truth of reality. Okay, so that's the chief way that Buddhas benefit sentient beings. And that's why of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, the Buddha's speech is of foremost importance, because it's through teaching us that the most help and benefit comes. Okay? Yeah. So this is really something to think about when we make prayers and aspirations to the Buddha. Yeah. So, people very often pray, may I recover from my illness? May I have enough money to go and do, attend Dharma teachings? People pray for these things. And I'm sure the prayers can have, some good effect and some benefit, okay, if there's a sincere aspiration. But the real way the Buddhas are going to benefit is by teaching us the Dharma, because by our learning the Dharma and putting it into practice, we change our karma, and when we change our karma, then the external situations that we're concerned about will change. Okay? So I think sometimes, yes, the Buddha, the Buddhas can help with external situations if we have the karma already there that can ripen. But if we don't, we can pray all we want and nothing happens. Yeah. Isn't there's some, there's some kind of joke in Islam that, kind of pertains to that, how they have this one kind of shyster who, you guys aren't showing any recognition. Yeah, something like that, Yeah, you pray to God, but you got to tie your camel too. So you can pray to God all you want, but if you don't tie your camel, he's going to run away. So don't pray to have camels, and don't pray for your camel to stay with you if you don't tie him. Yeah, because God can't answer your prayers. You got to be practical. The point is, you have to be practical, And so that, applies to Buddhism too. Yeah, I remember what it was, some kind of joke. Somebody praying to God to win the lottery and praying so hard, can I win the lottery, can I win the lottery? And then after a long time of doing this, all of a sudden there's this big, deep voice coming out of space that says, "Buy a ticket, you idiot." Yeah, so it's the same thing, You've got to do something yourself. Okay. We must follow this path. I'm sure wisdom will cut that part out. We must follow this path and practice it ourselves. No one else can do it for us. The Buddha himself encouraged us to understand his teachings, not to follow them blindly. Very important. This is especially so in the 21st century, when literacy and education are widespread and people are not content with blind belief. People have access to literature from many religions, and if the younger generation finds the explanations of older Buddhists superficial, inadequate, or superstitious, they will not be convinced. Thus, to benefit future generations, we must learn and practice the Dharma well, and then teach it to others, showing the benefit that Buddha's doctrine brings through the example of how we live. Okay? So this is, yesterday when I was talking about the situation in Singapore, when I first went there, this very much pertains to it. The young people were seeing people burning paper money and doing the Singaporean version of Mo's and this kind of thing, and saying, what's the sense of this? And, and then many of them converted. And so that actually prompted the Buddhists in Singapore to begin to have more teachings and to explain the teachings to the younger generation. So in the, almost 30 years since the first time I went there now, there's been an explosion of Buddhist centers and temples in Singapore, and now people really giving much, giving teachings so that the young people can learn. Yeah, so this is very, very important. And it pertains to the Tibetan situation as well. Yeah, the Tibetan lamas, when you talk to them, because the monks, like in India, they don't tend to teach the lay people very much. I mean, when His Holiness teaches, they all come to listen. But in the Mongote community, they have, two of the largest monasteries, plus some other smaller monasteries. And as far as I know, none of the monks go to the village and teach regular Dharma classes to the people. I asked about it once, and one Rinpoche said, well, they don't invite us. But, they're your sponsors. Isn't that, part of the, how you repay their kindness? And also, I think, reaching out. And so even in the West, when I brought it up to some of my teachers about the young Tibetans, they say, oh, but they're Tibetan, they'll never convert to another religion. I don't believe that, because as soon as the young people start getting going in a secular society, that has, and all their friends have other views, for sure they will convert. Or if they don't convert, they won't know very much about Buddhism itself, which is a great loss and a great pity. Yeah, so I think education is really the strength here, and they need more of that. I think in the Tibetan community, actually, among the lay people in the Tibetan community. To be able to take refuge in a proper way, we need to identify and have a clear understanding of the three jewels. To do that, understanding the four truths of the Aryas is important. Based on taking refuge, we continue to learn, contemplate, and meditate on the Buddhist teachings, thus deepening our refuge. That deeper refuge inspires us to learn and practice more, and so we progress with taking refuge and understanding the teachings, mutually aiding each other. Okay? So here you have, through study of the teaching, generating faith and confidence and trust in the three jewels, and by having more faith and confidence and trust, that opens your mind, makes your mind receptive, so you seek out more teachings and you can understand them better. As you understand them better, that increases your faith and trust and confidence in the three jewels, which then, prompts you to learn and reflect more. So you see here how like having faith and wisdom really complement each other, and both are necessary. Okay, so now the existence of the three jewels. Okay, so we may go a little bit over time, because I can't stop in the middle of this one. So we'll see. In the Pali and Sanskrit sutras, the Buddha said that whoever sees the interdependent nature of phenomena sees the Dharma, and whoever sees the Dharma sees the Tathagata. Nagarjuna explained that the key to verifying the existence of the three jewels is understanding the interdependent nature of phenomena. So His Holiness once said, what is, somebody asked him, what's Buddha's slogan? And he said, dependent arising. So now you're going to see why. Upon examination, so he's going into now the proof of the existence of the three jewels. And this is coming from Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way. Okay. Upon examination, we find that persons and phenomena are dependent. There are three aspects of dependence. One, conditioned things depend on causes and conditions. A sprout arises from a seed, and our experiences depend on our previous actions or karma. And our rebirth in samsara comes from its causes, ignorance and karma as well. All phenomena, both the impermanent and the permanent, depend on their constituent parts. Our body is made of parts such as arms, legs, and internal organs, and those are made of other parts. Our mind is composed of a sequence of tiny moments of mind that form its continuum. So the second one, calling it dependence on parts, sometimes it's spoken about as mutual dependence, that things coming into existence in relationship to each other. Okay. Then 3, on the subtlest level, all phenomena depend on the mind that conceives and designates them. On the basis of 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head, and so on, a mind conceives and designates body. In dependence on the collection of a body and mind, we impute person. Okay, so those are 3 kinds of dependence. Ignorance, the root of samsara, grasps all persons and phenomena as having a self. Okay? The meaning of self, an independent, inherent essence, unrelated to anything else, such as causes and conditions, parts, and the mind that conceives and designates them. Okay? So these 3 ways that things are dependent. Yeah, the mind that grasps at self-existence, and self-existence means here self means the object of negation, it means inherent existence, grasps in the total opposite way than how things exist. Things are dependent in those 3 ways. Yeah, the ignorance grasping inherent existence apprehends them as being independent, completely the opposite from how they exist. Because all persons and phenomena exist dependent on other factors, they are empty of independent or inherent existence. Okay? So because dependent and independent are mutually contradictory, and mutually exclusive, so something has to be either independent or dependent. Yeah. So if things are dependent, they can't be independent. Yeah. And independent and inherent existence are synonymous. Okay. So dependent arising is used as the reason to refute inherent existence. Thus, ignorance is an erroneous mind since it lacks a valid basis. Ignorance apprehends things as existing in the opposite way from how they actually exist. Ignorance, on the other hand, is a reliable mind. Wisdom, on the other hand, is a reliable mind, since it apprehends reality, it realizes that all persons and phenomena are empty of inherent existence because they exist dependent on other factors. Wisdom's apprehension of reality can overpower ignorance, and with repeated meditation, wisdom can completely eradicate ignorance from our mind stream, making liberation possible. Okay? So, because wisdom apprehends things as they exist, and which is the opposite way from how ignorance apprehends them. It means what ignorance apprehends is totally wrong. Yeah? The ignorance is mistaken with respect to its object of apprehension. Yeah? So when you see things as they are, then because that's true, that can overpower the ignorance that sees things as they aren't. Okay, so it's like, if I show you this and I say, it's purple, it's purple, it's purple, you can tell from your own experience it's white, and no matter how much I say it's purple, you don't believe me. Okay, so ignorance can say, oh, things truly, inherently exist. But with wisdom, when you're absolutely certain that no, they don't inherently exist because they are dependent, then you don't believe what the ignorance says. And the wisdom can completely eradicate the ignorance. Okay? Which means that it's possible to attain liberation. Yeah. If things existed inherently, attaining liberation would be impossible, because then ignorance would be a correct mind, and there would be no way to get rid of it. Okay? So in this way, knowledge of dependent arising helps us to understand the four truths that form the basic framework of the Buddha's teachings. Okay? Ignorance, misapprehending reality, gives rise to afflictions which create karma and lead to dukkha. This is the truth of dukkha and the truth of its origin. Yeah, the first two truths of the Aryas. Okay, so we've already proven, that the first two truths of the Aryas exist. Knowledge of dependent arising also enables us to understand emptiness and selflessness. Persons and other phenomena are empty of independent existence because they are dependent. Okay, this is all according to the Prasangika view. Emptiness and dependent arising are established by reasoning and can be directly experienced. So you don't accept them by blind belief. Yeah, they are not very obscured objects that you have to take somebody else's word on. They're things that we can use our own reasoning to first gain a correct inference about, and then later, through uniting serenity and insight, gain a direct perception of. Okay? The wisdom understanding emptiness is the fourth truth, true path, which counteracts ignorance, wrong views, and afflictions that are founded on the misapprehension of reality. In this way, we can actualize a state in which all ignorance and afflictions have been removed. This is nirvana, true cessation, the third truth. Okay? So when you understand that, when you have some understanding of dependent arising, then you understand that ignorance is a wrong view. You understand that dukkha comes out of this ignorance, because the ignorance produces afflictions, which produce karma, which give rise to rebirth. Then you understand that, again, since ignorance is a wrong mind, an incorrect consciousness, when you perceive things as they are, that they're empty of inherent existence because they're dependent arising, you can eradicate the ignorance. Yeah, that wisdom that does that is the true path, and the eradication of the ignorance and the dukkha that it causes is true cessation. So we have just proven the existence of the Four Noble Truths. Yeah. I heard this several times, and then one time I heard it and I went, oh my God. You know? It's like it took me many times of hearing it before I went, oh, wow, this is it. Yeah. Thus the four truths of the Aryas exist. The last two of the four truths, true cessations and true paths, are the Dharma jewel. Okay? So we now have we've just proven that the Dharma jewel exists. Okay? Persons who have actualized at least some of these paths and cessations in their continuum are the Sangha jewel. Now, the Sangha jewel exists. When they progress to the point where all afflictions and obscurations have been eliminated and all paths and qualities brought to perfection, they become the Buddha jewel. You seeing what he's doing here? Thus, beginning with the fact that all phenomena are empty of independent existence, yet arise dependent on other factors, we can prove the existence of the three jewels. For this reason, the Buddha said that those who see interdependence see the Dharma, and those who see the Dharma see the Tathagata. And this is brilliant, beyond belief, you know. Understanding this increases our faith in the three jewels, because we understand the possibility of mental development that leads to actualizing the three jewels. In this way, understanding the four truths gives us confidence that not only can we trust the three jewels as spiritual guides leading us to full awakening, but we can also become the three jewels ourselves. So this is one way in which Buddhism is completely different from theistic religions. In theistic religions, there is an irreparable gap between the holy and us. In Buddhism, we have the Buddha nature, the Buddha potential. When you clear away the obstructing factors, our mind becomes the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Yeah, we become the, objects of refuge. The historical order of the existence of the three jewels and their order of generation for individual practitioners differ. Historically, the Buddha appeared first. He then gave the Dharma teachings. On the basis of practicing these, people gained realizations. Disciples possessing realizations are Aryas, the Sangha. So historically, first Buddha, then Dharma, then Sangha. Okay. As an individual practitioner, an individual practitioner first actualizes the Dharma jewel by cultivating true path and actualizing true cessation. Thus, he or she becomes the Sangha jewel by further enhancing the Dharma jewel in his or her mind until he or she is fully awakened. They become the Buddha jewel. So in terms of our progress on the path and our becoming the three jewels, first it's the Dharma, then the Sangha, then the Buddha. Okay, so this is also why they say that of the three jewels, the Sangha is the Dharma is the actual refuge, because the Dharma is the true paths and true cessations, and they're what actually protect our mind, because when we actualize them and transform our mind into them, then that's, then the dukkha and the causes of dukkha are gone. Okay. We finished in time.
I remember when Geshe Topke was here, I think it was the first time he was here, he said that one of the reasons why the Dharma disappeared in India was because all of the great Buddhist studies and practice was isolated in the monasteries, and that they didn't extend themselves out into the communities.
Right.
And that's why they disappeared.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they have that same, the thinking may happen now, that for the Tibetans, not sharing with the laity of the Tibetan communities, it might get lost in their transmission as well.
Yeah. Yeah. His Holiness actually says that one of the reasons Buddhism, got lost in India is that when you had the Mongol invasion, they destroyed the, Nalanda, Adantapuri, Vikramashila, the major centers of learning where the scriptures were located, where the Sangha was located. And because the lay people in the village didn't know enough about Buddhism to keep it going in their own customs and traditions, it easily got overcome by, Hinduism and other things that were practiced, in the villages. Yeah. So really emphasizing that just having, scholars and, meditators isn't enough. You need it to be popular in the general culture.
So the Fourfold Assembly has more meaning when you really think about what happened.
Yeah. When you think about what happened, the idea of the Fourfold Sangha is very important. Yeah. Very, very important.